Hi everyone, welcome to Mumso Code video guide session. In the previous video, we designed our models, that is category and items, and we said how they are related to the user table. Now we are going to create the category model in C# and tell the entity framework to translate that into a table. Let's get started. I'm going to have a folder for the categories. Then my model name is going to be category. Okay. The properties are grid and ID. So this has to come from system. My next property is of type string and the name is name. Okay. Now comes the auditing fields. So this is going to be date time offset and created date. The next one is going to be for updated date. As we saw in the previous video, these are required for our auditing purpose, updated date. Okay, now two more is going to be grid, and I'm going to say who created this. So created by, and then the last one is grid, and this is going to be updated by. Okay, now we have created a model. Let's go write our broker to say this is the table name that I want for the SQL Server. So let's go with our interface first. My storage broker, and the model is going to be category. It's going to turn red. Yeah, so it needs a partial modifier. Let me pin this. It went with interface. Then what I need is my implementation. So storage broker category CS. Okay, and this also has to be a partial class. Now what I want to say is this is going to take a DB set. Type is going to be category. And the table name that I want is categories. And the property is. Okay. So to resolve the reference, control and dot or click on the icon on the left side. So this is the namespace where I've defined the category. Okay. So in the user case, what we did was we wanted to seed the user. So we wanted a default user to be part of the table. Whereas in this case, whenever there is a request coming in to persist a category, we want that persist to happen. So what we want to establish is just the connection. We don't want to seed any data here. For that, what we're going to do is go add a file called references, where we'll establish how this table is related to the other tables. So here I'm going to say storage broker and my entity is category. And then what it's going to do is it's going to establish the references. Okay. Yeah, this is going to be a partial class. Okay. So for the seed users, what we did, we took in the model builder, which is going to establish the data to be saved. Same way, we're going to do this. So this is going to be private, static, void, and this is going to be set category references. And input is going to be model builder. Okay. The first thing that we want to have here is the primary key. Since entity framework is intelligent enough to take the attribute name, that is ID, and treat that as the primary key. And in our case also we do have ID, so let's not worry about the primary key. Then we should now establish our relationship between the category table and the user table. So here what we say is model builder dot entity, and what's the entity? Category is my entity. And I'm going to say this category table has one user. So here what I say is category dot created user, created by user. So what I have to establish is go back to your category model. For the created by, what we have here is just one user, right? So let's say created by has a user ID called 123, which is associated to an admin, and that's the only user that has created this category. So user, and then this is going to be created by user. Here, since this is a grouping, we can separate it out. And similarly, we need an updated by. So even the updated by is going to be a user, and we're going to call that as updated by user. Okay, so let's go back to our references. Okay, so we are saying that a particular category entry that you find in the table is going to be associated to one and only user in the user table, whereas a particular user can have many categories created. So Shri being a user in the system, I came in and created a category called colors. And then I came in and created a category called seasons. So if I'm going to query and say, hey, give me all the categories created by the user Shri, it's going to give me a list of categories. So that's what we are establishing here. A particular category is associated to one user, but a particular user has many categories. So that's what we're going to say with many user, and then user dot created categories. So this one has to be defined in the user model. So let's get here. So here what we're going to say is it's going to be a property, and it's going to say collection of. So I enumerable of, and what's the entity that it's going to have? It's going to have category. And then the name of the grouping that I want to call is created categories. Okay. So whenever we are performing our operation on the models, generally we transform these models into JSON requests between services, right? So in that case, what we want is whenever I'm passing in the user model, I don't want that to have all the created categories for it. So I want to ignore whenever the serialization and deserialization happens. So for that, we're going to say JSON ignore. If you over that, it says instructs the serializer not to serialize the public field or public read or write property value. So it's good to have here because you might forget when you actually perform the serialization or deserialization when you're working on the business logics. So it's good to perform here whenever you want to ignore that while you create it. Okay. So now I've mentioned it this here. Let me go back to my references. Okay, now what I've said so far is a particular category as one user associated to it, and the same user can have multiple categories. Then what else? I have to say, what is that particular field in the category table that is going to make that relationship? So it's kind of giving you that. So I say has foreign key category, and the foreign key here is created by. So category dot created by is my foreign key. Okay. Then let's say if a particular category entry is getting deleted, what should we do? Should we delete this reference or not? So what we're going to say is delete. We want to control how we're deleting it. So whenever the category is getting deleted, we're saying don't perform any other, ripple effect of the deletion. Okay. So the same thing holds good for the updated by category. And then this time, what I'm going to say is it has one category with updated. And then this as with many user who has created these categories, user dot updated categories. I think it has to be here. So again, I say JSON ignore, and then I enumerable of category. And the property name that I want to call here is updated category. Going back to the references that we were establishing, and now I'm going to say it has a foreign key. And what's the foreign key here is category dot behavior. Whenever you're deleting a particular record in the category, do not perform any other operations. So delete behavior dot no action. Okay. Then what we have to say is who will call this method? When should this method be triggered? Well, let's get back to our storage broker. So here is where we are saying on model creating method, go call this method for seed users where we populate the data for the user table. So now this is the same place where we're going to say, once you populate the user data, go set the references for the category table as well. Okay. So far, we have done all the wiring that is required for the entity framework to translate the category class that we have written to the SQL database and for the relationships that we have mentioned. Now, to perform the migration, what we want to do is go to the Package Manager console. If you don't have it open, you can always get it out from Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and Package Manager console. Okay. So what I want here is add migration, and the name that I want to give here is add category. Okay, and enter. It's going to build your solution and then perform the migration based on the relations that you mentioned there. It's going to generate few C# file. Okay, so this file needs to have a header. Again, let's try to understand this. So what it's saying is whenever the migration is being executed, go create a table called categories, and that table has these columns. Along with that, this is a primary key, that's my ID column, and then it has a foreign key that is created by, and the foreign key is referenced to a table called users, and the column in that table is ID. The same thing for the updated by. And then it's creating a couple of indexes. And then whenever there is a reverse of the migration, just go drop the table. Okay, good. Now let's go verify if our database has this table called category. Let me refresh it. Expand the database here. Random tables. Okay, it did not have that. Let me try to update the database. Update database. Okay. So let's go to the SQL Server Explorer again, and then try to refresh it, open it up, random tables. Yeah, so this one has a category, and you can expand all these to read through how it got translated. Right now, we don't have any data to view edit, but this is what the entity framework has done for you to translate the C# code to your SQL databases. Okay, that's it. In the next video, we have one more entity to migrate, that is the items. That's going to be even more different than what we did, but somewhat similar. So we'll be establishing the connection to this category table along with the user table. See you all next time.